Released in 1985, Back to the Future shook America not only because of its time-traveling adventures with the gleaming silver DeLorean, but also due to a series of dramatic behind-the-scenes, secrets, nerve-wracking incidents and bold decisions that nearly altered the course of film history. Few could have imagined that the production once abruptly dismissed a famous star after just 6 weeks of filming for a shocking reason. And that's not all. One of the main actors even threw the entire script straight into the trash without reading a single page. Yet the truth runs deeper. Right now, here are 20 strange secrets about Back to the Future that even the most devoted fans may have never known. 1. Eric Stoltz was fired after 6 weeks of filming. 6 weeks. More than 40 days of non-stop shooting, thousands of meters of film already captured, millions of dollars already spent. And then, everything was thrown away without mercy. The reason Eric Stoltz, the actor chosen to play Marty McFly, was completely out of sync with the vision that director Robert Zemeckis had. Stoltz performed with too much seriousness, too much darkness. He rejected all humor, staying in character, even after the cameras stopped rolling. On set, no one was allowed to call him by his real name. Only Marty was permitted to exist. At first, the crew tried to endure, but gradually that suffocating heaviness began to strangle the heartbeat of the story. Zemeckis was forced to make a cold decision dismissal. Everything had to be reshot from the beginning with Michael J. Fox. The budget exploded, the schedule collapsed, but there was no other way out. And just as everyone thought the shock had passed, another figure was about to unleash a true storm. 2. Christopher Lloyd almost abandoned the role of Doc Brown. Few realize that Doc Brown, the very soul of Back to the Future, once nearly ceased to exist. When the script was delivered, Christopher Lloyd was exhausted after a string of demanding projects. He didn't bother finishing, it just flipped through a few pages and tossed it straight into the trash. If the story had ended there, cinema would have lost one of its greatest characters. But fortunately, it was Lloyd's wife who pulled the manuscript from the garbage, handed it back to him, and urged him to read it carefully. This time, when Lloyd reached the scene where Doc Brown shouted "Great Scott" amid his wild inventions, he felt as if struck by lightning. He immediately realized that this was the role that would allow him to break through every limit. The call to his agent was made that very night. The role of Doc Brown was still his, and only a few months later, the world witnessed those wild eyes and electrified hair step out of Lloyd's imagination. Yet before that became reality, the film had already been coldly rejected by a Hollywood giant. 3. Crispin Glover, George McFly, extremism in acting. If Eric Stoltz threw the production into turmoil for being replaced midway, then Crispin Glover, who played George McFly, created another kind of chaos born from extremism. Glover did not only become the character when the camera rolled. Even during breaks, he remained George, trembling, voice, awkward gestures, eyes constantly avoiding. He argued with the director about every tiny detail, how George should smile, how he should sit even, whether he should shake hands with his own son in the ending scene. When the script required him to hang upside down, Glover stubbornly rejected special effects, forcing the crew to hang him upside down for real, exhausting the entire team just to serve this demand. Conflicts escalated. When Part 2 began, Crispin Glover was immediately crossed off, but the story did not stop there. The studio used a fake face to replace him and Glover sued. The result? He won. The production had to pay significant compensation and also change how actors' images could be used in later installments. And almost another symbol of Back to the Future would have vanished right from the beginning. 4. Disney rejected it because of the mother loves son element. When the script of Back to the Future was sent to Disney, everyone thought it would be an easy deal, a family comedy, a unique time travel concept, something marketable for all ages. but the response was as cold as ice. They not only refused, they flatly declared the script unacceptable. The reason in the film Marty McFly accidentally causes his 17-year-old mother to fall for her own son. For Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, it was a comedic twist pushing the story into an awkward dilemma. But for Disney, it carried the stench of incest far too dangerous to attach to their brand. One executive even mocked, "You're pitching us a family movie." But the mother goes on a date with her son. The Disney door slammed shut. The project was expelled from the fairy tale kingdom in just one meeting. But once the script landed at Universal, it opened the door to another brutal challenge, turning Michael J. Fox into Marty McFly, under a schedule so grueling it nearly destroyed his health. 5. Michael J. Fox filmed in a state of exhaustion. As soon as he took on the role of Marty McFly, Michael J. Fox plunged into a brutal schedule that almost no one could endure. By day, he was confined to the set of the sitcom Family Ties, filming from early morning until late at night. With barely enough time to change clothes and gulp down a coffee, he was immediately driven straight to the set of Back to the Future, shooting through the night until 4 a.m. Snatching short naps on a car seat, eating irregular meals. Fox survived on caffeine, adrenaline, and a willpower that knew no limits. For more than 60 consecutive days, he lived in two realities in the morning. The cheerful sitcom star. At night, the reckless teenager steering the DeLorean through time. No rest days, no full nights of sleep. What is astonishing is that on screen, no one could tell. Fox's Marty McFly overflowed with energy, wit, and quickness, a flawless performance concealing the exhaustion consuming his body. Robert Zemeckis declared, without hesitation, "Without Fox, this movie would not exist." And fortunately, it existed under the name Back to the Future instead of a bizarre title. 6. The script nearly renamed Spaceman from Pluto. When reading the script, Universal executive Sid Sheinberg thought, Back to the Future was a difficult title to market. He proposed renaming it Spaceman from Pluto, based on the scene where Marty wears a radiation suit pretending to be an alien to scare George. That suggestion left the entire crew speechless. Steven Spielberg made a clever move. He sent Sheinberg a thank you letter for such a funny joke, forcing the executive to save face by pretending it had indeed been a joke. Thanks to that maneuver, the title Back to the Future survived and went on to become legendary. But the film's name was not the only thing that nearly changed beyond recognition. 7. The Time Machine was originally a nuclear-powered refrigerator. Few know that in the earliest drafts, the Time Machine was not the gleaming DeLorean, but in fact a giant refrigerator. Marty would have had to transport it to the Nevada nuclear test site and use the detonation of an atomic bomb to return to the future. It sounded thrilling, but Steven Spielberg immediately foresaw disaster. Children might imitate it, crawl into refrigerators, and turn it into a deadly game. The idea was scrapped, giving way to the DeLorean, and from there, an immortal cinematic icon was born. And speaking of icons, even the White House once burst into laughter because of a detail in the film. 8. Ronald Reagan enjoyed the joke about himself. In the 1955 setting of Back to the Future, when Marty blurts out, "The president is Ronald Reagan," Doc Brown instantly laughs in disbelief. The actor, "Then who's the vice president, Jerry Lewis?" A sharp jab aimed directly at the sitting US president, the kind of thing that would make any film crew tremble at the thought of the White House's reaction. But when the film was screened right there, Reagan did not get angry. He laughed so hard that he demanded the scene be replayed inside the presidential screening room. And then, before millions of people, in the 1986 State of the Union address, Reagan delivered that very line from the movie Where We're Going, We Don't Need Roads. A spectacular reversal, transforming a cinematic joke into a national declaration. Meanwhile, in another corner of the production, a rock star was secretly setting up a scene of self-embarrassment with his own song. 9. Huey Lewis cameo, rejecting his very own song. Huey Lewis, the rock star of the 1980s, was the writer of The Power of Love and Back in Time for Back to the Future. But instead of remaining only behind the scenes, he quietly appeared in the film with a surprising cameo. It was the moment when Marty's band was performing passionately on stage. Lewis, playing a judge, coldly cut off the music and delivered a blunt verdict. "You're just too darn loud." The unbelievable part is that the song they were playing was The Power of Love, his very own creation. A bold act of self-mockery, both witty and ironic, that many viewers completely missed on their first watch. 10:44 drafts of the script before filming began. Back to the Future was not an idea perfect from the start. Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale spent 4 years going through 44 rewrites to finally arrive at the finished script. In the earliest versions, the time machine was imagined as a photo booth powered by Coca-Cola, or simply as a fixed device. Each revision was a gamble, changing the setting, removing characters, even rewriting the entire climax. Only when the DeLorean was tied to the lightning strike on the clock tower did the story finally lock in. But before the film could reach theatres, one sensitive detail nearly got erased right in the editing room. 11. The Libya terrorist scene nearly cut. Right at the opening, Doc Brown collapses under a hail of bullets from the Libyan militants, retaliating for his theft of plutonium. Just seconds earlier, the audience was laughing at the clutter of the laboratory. Seconds later, gunfire tore through the screen, dragging everyone into an atmosphere of alarm and darkness. During test screenings, many sat in stunned silence. Universal feared that portraying Middle Eastern terrorists would ignite political controversy, and at one point even considered removing the subplot entirely. But Robert Zemeckis stood firm, convinced that the shock was the irreplaceable spark for Marty's adventure. It was a gamble, and it paid off spectacularly. In theatres, the chase with the Libyans left viewers breathless, then erupting in cheers when the DeLorean vanished in a blinding flash of light. No one expected that the very machine which saved Marty would prove to be a notorious mechanical trap behind the scenes. 12. The DeLorean, the steel coffin with jammed doors. On screen, Marty McFly slipped in and out of the DeLorean as smoothly as a seasoned racer. But behind the camera, that shiny silver car was really a steel coffin with its gull-wing doors notorious for jamming. When filming inside the studio or parked on uneven ground, the doors often refused to open. Actors were trapped inside under scorching lights, drenched in sweat. On one occasion, Michael J. Fox was stuck so long the crew had to pry the doors open with a crowbar, even removing the roof to free him. Every time he stepped into Marty's shoes, Fox was not just acting. He was quietly praying to escape the car intact. And as if that wasn't enough trouble, even the leading lady beside him was replaced at the last minute simply because of her height. 13. Jennifer Parker replaced because of height. At first, the role of Jennifer Parker was given to Melora Hardin. But when Michael J. Fox officially replaced Eric Stoltz, everything immediately shifted. Hardin was a few centimeters taller than Fox, a detail seemingly minor, but judged by the producers as disrupting the balance of the couple's image on screen. With one cold decision, Hardin was crossed out even though she was ready to step onto the set. Claudia Wells, who had previously declined the role due to family reasons, was called back and took over the character only a few days before filming began. From a sudden replacement, Wells became the Jennifer Parker remembered by audiences worldwide. Few realised that even the ending of the film was once completely different from what audiences eventually saw. 14. The original ending had no clock tower. In the earlier script, drafts the climax of Back to the Future looked completely different. One version sent Marty to the Nevada nuclear test site using the detonation of an atomic bomb to activate the time machine. Another lighter version had Marty enter the time machine into a school science fair and win first prize, but none of them carried enough weight. Only when the idea of the lightning striking the clock tower was conceived did the story find its true cinematic heartbeat. The tense race between the DeLorean and the lightning bolt Doc Brown dangling in the pouring rain, and the fateful contact at exactly 88 miles per hour. That climax became one of the most beloved scenes in film history. And in another unforgettable moment, a notorious bully would make the audience burst into laughter with just one line, completely wrong. 15. Thomas F. Wilson. Biff improvises the line, "Make like a tree." Thomas F. Wilson, the infamous bully Biff Tannen, accidentally created one of the most quoted lines of the entire trilogy. In the original script, Biff was supposed to yell, "Make like a tree," and leave. But during filming, Wilson slipped and turned it into, "Make like a tree and get out of here."
And I'm giving it to you.
Well, that's very nice. Thank you very much. Now, why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
Laughter erupted across the set. That slip of the tongue was perfect for the image of a guy who thought himself clever but was actually clumsy and dim-witted. The director immediately decided to keep it turning the line into Biff's personal trademark. Wilson didn't stop there. He added numerous other Biffisms, from the insult butthead to the harsh demand. "Think McFly." Those improvised lines elevated Biff beyond the cliché of a one-note bully, transforming him into a villain both despised and unforgettable. And unbelievably, a single scene would later take the crew 3 whole months to complete. 16. The lightning strike scene consumed 3 months of filming. The climax of the lightning striking the clock tower, Marty racing the DeLorean to 88 miles per hour, Doc Brown clinging to the cables in the pouring rain, became one of the immortal images of Back to the Future. But to capture those few minutes on screen, the crew endured 3 relentless months of shooting. They built the full clock tower facade outdoors, rigged real cables for Christopher Lloyd to dangle from, in artificial rain, forcing him to deliver rapid-fire lines while hanging in freezing conditions. At the same time, special effects teams synchronized fire effects miniatures and optical tricks, ensuring every lightning bolt and cable contact was exact. Even the smallest error meant starting all over again. And there was another scene that would shock audiences because of just how real it truly was. 17. The tire fire trails were real. The 2 blazing fire trails left behind the DeLorean the moment that marked the leap through time were not a Hollywood trick. They were real flames. The crew laid strips of gasoline-soaked cloth exactly along the tire marks, measuring every centimetre, so that the instant Marty vanished, the fire would ignite and consume the entire frame. The scene lasted only a few seconds, but the risk was immense. A single mistimed move or the car drifting off the fiery track would have ruined the shot, along with hours of preparation. Technicians stood by with fire extinguishers while actors and cameras were kept at a safe distance. Under the scorching heat, this was no longer cinema. It was an actual explosion staged in the middle of the set. And remarkably, the man piloting that DeLorean, Doc Brown, was himself a blend of personalities so unlikely it seemed impossible. 18. Einstein and Leopold Stokowski's influence on Doc. Doc Brown was not merely a fictional creation. He was born from two real-life inspirations. From Albert Einstein, Christopher Lloyd borrowed the wild, electrified silver hair, the brilliant gleam of a genius's eyes, and the posture of a man forever racing against his own thoughts. From Leopold Stokowski, the legendary conductor Lloyd took the dramatic flair of performance, sweeping arm gestures, powerful spins, as if orchestrating an entire symphony of the universe. When these two influences fused, Doc Brown became a one-of-a-kind cinematic being, part eccentric scientist, part performing artist, both dangerous and mesmerizing. When he ranted about 1.21 gigawatts or shouted, Great Scott, audiences instantly believed this man could truly turn a car into a machine that ripped through time. Amid the explosions and eccentric characters, Back to the Future also hid clever jokes crafted only for the sharpest eyes to notice. 19. Easter egg changing the Twin Pines Mall name. When Marty accidentally knocked down one of Mr. Peabody's two pine trees in 1955, audiences assumed it was just a minor detail with no impact on the future. But when Marty returned to 1985, the sign Twin Pines Mall had quietly transformed into Lone Pine Mall. This was not an editing trick. The crew had actually built two separate signs and swapped them depending on the timeline. Many first-time viewers completely missed it, but once noticed, it became clear in the Back to the Future universe, everything done in the past leaves its trace, even running over a single tree. And there was another joke, sharper and more biting, planted as revenge for a decision that almost disfigured the film's title. 20. Easter egg mocking spaceman from Pluto. In 1955, Marty crashes straight into a chicken coop. A young boy stands frozen trembling as he holds a comic book with the bold title, Space Zombies from Pluto.
That ain't no airplane! Look!
This was no accident. It was a deliberate jab from the crew aimed at Sid Sheinberg, the Universal executive who nearly forced the film to be renamed Spaceman from Pluto. Instead of erasing that unpleasant memory, the filmmakers tucked it into the movie, but not as a grand cinematic title, rather as a cheap comic book clutched in the hands of a frightened kid. A razor-sharp mockery. No explanation needed, just a single frame, and everyone who knew the story understood that title, if it ever existed, belonged only in a pile of disposable children's comics. Released in 1985, Back to the Future not only triumphed at the box office, but also became a global cultural phenomenon. The film is living proof of the power of bold imagination, of a story that is both familiar and transcendent through time, and of characters that have been etched into the memories of generations. Marty McFly, Doc Brown, the Gleaming DeLorean. All of them are now not only cinematic icons, but also part of popular culture's heritage. The influence of Back to the Future spread far beyond the screen. From lines of dialogue quoted countless times, to toys and collectible models, to innumerable works of art, television programs, and even scientific research inspired by the film Robert Zemeckis' creation reached into every corner of life. And each time the milestone of Marty's return date arrived, the entire world buzzed with excitement, proving its undying appeal. Nearly 4 decades later, Back to the Future still stands tall as a golden landmark of Hollywood. Both a time machine carrying audiences back to childhood and a mirror reflecting humanity's boldest dreams. If you love this film, make sure to like, share, to spread the endless spirit of adventure, and subscribe to continue exploring other cinematic legends.